might get a little bit too gory for some people, so if at any point you start to feel uncomfortable, please click away because your mental health is the most important thing, and I refuse to be your trigger point, so let's just do it. A terrible rumor made quick rounds through the unhoused community of Tompkins Square Park in 1989, Manhattan, New York. It was the kind of disturbing story that settled like a relentless shadow over the neighborhood. The buzz was such that the city's police officers had no choice but to investigate. After all, how else does one respond to stories of a woman's head boiling over an apartment stove? Welcome to Creepycassettiyt, your place for horror in reality and beyond. I am your host Dee, and if dark, mysterious topics are interesting to you, we do that here, so please subscribe. Please like the video and tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Daniel Rakowitz was a military brat, spending years of his childhood traveling all over the world with his father, and at the age of 3, while on one of their international excursions, his mother tragically passed away of a heart attack in front of Daniel. Just 3 months later, his father remarried Daniel's aunt, his mother's sister. Yeah, I'd have some questions too, honestly. Daniel's relationship with his father was rocky at best. His dad was rigid and stern, the kind of demeanor only years in the military can instill in a person. On top of the familiar issues, he was diagnosed with multiple mental illnesses, being forced to take Ritalin and ADHD medication from the age of 9 to the age of 11. And at 14, he'd been forced to undergo electroshock treatment. It was also around this time that he started experimenting with drugs. When Daniel's father, Anthony, retired from military service, the family settled down in Rockport, Texas, and his dad took a position as the local sheriff. A few years later, the relationship with his father completely disintegrated and Daniel was kicked out. In 1983, when Daniel was 23 years old, he married a 14-year-old girl. Just hell no. He said this of his marriage: "I did indeed have a dream, and it told me that I would come into total possession of a 14-year-old girl who 2 weeks later would become my wife. And before we got married, I said, according to June, you're gonna leave me and I will go to New York and find a blonde-haired woman and get married. And someday I come back and according to the dream, you come back to me, but you have another man's child." Come into possession? Really, Daniel? She's a whole soul. You can't possess a person. Anyway, at some point in 1981, Daniel left Texas and drifted for a few years. And then in 1985, he ended up in Tompkins Square, Manhattan, New York. At this time in history, Tompkins Square Park had become a haven for the unhoused community of New York City. Due to the rising cost of living and laws that were enacted around that time, many people were losing their housing and setting up tents in the park. Of course, the government wasn't about to take that lying down, so they stepped in, started trying to remove people by force. The people who called Tompkins Square Park home weren't going to go quietly. Many peacefully protested and were met with aggression and violence. Daniel, who self-proclaimed marijuana guru, was making quite the impression around the time as a strange gentleman who walked around with a scrawny chicken on his shoulder like some kind of land pirate. He picked up part-time work as a cook and side hustled a bit selling the devil's lettuce. Marijuana guru is a real interesting way to call yourself a pothead, but go off. One day, he sold a bag of his wares to a lady named Sylvia. And I don't know what her last name is, and I'm not trying to send any heat her way because remember, these are like real stories and real people and we're not doing that. The two got to know each other over the course of a few days, but after one peaceful protest turned violent by use of police force, Sylvia offered up the second bedroom in her apartment to Daniel. Sylvia and her boyfriend of 3 years, Sean, had been looking for a roommate anyway. The couple lived in a dingy, cramped, expensive 2-bedroom apartment that cost them about $500 a month, which would be worth around $1,232.62 today with inflation. Rakowitz took the couple up on their offer, offering to pay half of the rent. On July 7, 1989, Sylvia and Sean welcomed this scruffy, long-haired drifter into their humble abode. Daniel brought with him 3 cats and his scrawny rooster, ironically named named Rooster, which set off its own series of red flags for some people because animals were known to go missing around Daniel. Some people claimed that he was a Satan worshiper and he would use the animals for his rituals. Sylvia mentioned that after he moved in, he seemed like a regular guy. He showered, he worked, he loved that he now had access to a kitchen and a large TV. The TV, which he gained a real fixation on, continuously staying up till dawn some days and trying to coax his roommates into watching the next show. Even though he no longer lived in Tompkins Square Park, that didn't stop him from giving back to the community that welcomed him when he had no permanent structure to rest his head. So how did he give back? He fed the people. He would go to the grocery store and ask patrons to donate food items to him. He would ask for things like bread and chicken and vegetables, etc. Many people were happy to help, and he would go back to the apartment with 30 to 40 pounds of food, cook all of it up, and feed whoever was hungry. But when he wasn't working, dealing, or cooking, he was babbling, and I do mean babbling, about all kinds of crazy stuff. The guy founded his own religion called the Church of 966. Not sure where 966 comes from. If you've heard of Daniel and you have more insight into this, please enlighten us in the comments below. He would say really culty things like, I am the Lord of Lords, and by 1992 my followers are going to take over. This dude really thought he was some sort of earthbound deity, and he justified this using his birthday saying, I was born on Christmas Eve, 12/24/60, which equals 96, and I have 18 letters to my name. I was born in the 21st hour, which is 9:02 p.m., which they say signifies the coming of the Lord Jesus according to what the Bible says. Sure, Daniel. Just the kind of weird things one would attribute to someone like David Koresh. He really wanted to gain followers. He wanted people to listen to his delusions and twist themselves into knots in order to believe them. But unlike other cult leaders, he didn't have that charisma. His babblings just came off as the unhinged fantasies of a mentally ill individual. Plus, where other cult leaders are pretty intelligent, I mean, how else do you manipulate complete strangers into believing you're far bigger than your itty bitty britches? You have to be able to prove you're smarter. With Daniel, it just wasn't believable. So a few months after Daniel moved in, Sylvia and Sean experienced some turmoil in their relationship and decided to end things. Sean moved out, and soon after, Sylvia moved back to her and Sean's hometown of Morris, New Jersey. That left Daniel paying the rent alone, and it just wasn't feasible. Knowing what we know of the guy, he wasn't exactly any landlord's ideal tenant. Plus, when the lease changed hands, the rent was going up to $605. And just a quick side note, you can tell this took place 40 plus years ago because rent in Manhattan is 10 to 20 times that now. As a matter of fact, I was curious, so I looked up rent in Manhattan in 2023, found a studio apartment with one tiny bath for $4,095 a month. And I'm looking at this apartment and it's like the size of my living room. And granted, I live in Virginia in a smaller town, so $4,095 a month would put someone in a 2 to 3 story brick with 4 to 6 bedrooms, 2 to 3 baths, finished basement, the whole nine where I live. So this is just insane. I mean, I would literally pee my pants just looking at the price. There's just no effing way. Plus, tenants had to verify they could pay 40 times the rent. That's insane. Tangent over, sorry about that. Anyway, so Daniel had grown paranoid. He thought Sean was going to kick him out, which was not the case. As any wannabe cult leader would, he did what he could to stay out of any databases. So he didn't want his name on anything anyway, including the lease of the apartment. So he really needed to find a roommate. 2 weeks later, he met Monika Beerle. Monika was a 26-year-old modern dance professional with the thin features, dirty blonde hair, you know, just the sort of dancer physique you picture. You get what I'm saying. She had already received a certificate in teaching and choreography from the Sigurd Leader School, and she was also studying at the Martha Graham Center of Contemporary Dance. In late April of 1989, Monika had gone from living in an apartment at 93 Orchard Street to living at 171 Avenue B, but she was unhappy with 171 for whatever reason, and within 2 weeks of living there, she was already looking for a different place to live. Monika, who was originally from Switzerland, didn't exactly have family to fall back on in the States, so she danced a few nights a week at Billy's Topless to make ends meet. She told Daniel that she was looking for a new place to live. That just worked out perfectly for Daniel, so he pitched the idea. Monika could move in with him. He led her back to the apartment, and after she agreed to move in, the two toasted their future with spliffies from Daniel's stash. In August, Daniel spent hours deep cleaning the apartment for Monika's arrival. Then Monika officially moved in. A few days before the lease was set to change hands, Sylvia popped into the apartment. apartment. Daniel was slow to come to the door, and when he finally did come, he was zipping up his pants. Sylvia walked in and Daniel introduced her to Monika, letting her know Monika was the new roommate and that she would be taking over the lease. Sylvia told Monika point blank Daniel was going around telling people that you were an item, to which Monika confirmed they were. However, after the incident this whole video is about, which we'll get to, Monika's friends would say there's no way she would have considered Daniel a viable dating option. But I mean, let's not act like girls don't make worse decisions daily for the slightest hint of attraction though, so, you know, whatever. After Sylvia met Monika, she had some qualms about the relationship. She let Daniel know about it. She told Daniel that she didn't think Monika was in it for anything more than the apartment, and that once her name was on the lease, she would kick him out. Daniel rejected that idea, saying he believed she cared about him. Yet, a lot of people said she pretty much just treated him like trash, so I don't know about all that. He even told Sylvia a few different times that he loved Monika. Sylvia even reflected he would always talk about Monika and do anything he could to make her more comfortable, even offering to cook her a hot meal, waiting on her hand and foot. If there was any real relationship between Monika and Daniel, it ended very quickly, and soon after, Monika started bringing other men home, which obviously made Daniel pretty jealous. On top of that, Monika's friends did all they could to convince her that Daniel was dangerous and she needed to get him out of that apartment. Something they said must have really clicked with Monika, because within one day of her dropping off the deposit and signing on the dotted line, she was kicking Daniel out of the apartment. Which, granted, that's kind of messed up. Don't get me wrong, I could see why Daniel would be really upset about it, but it definitely did not warrant this gruesome retaliation. Sylvia was right after all, but Daniel wasn't giving up that easy. He was going in overtime to be the perfect roommate. Whatever he could do to stay, but none of it worked. Monika wasn't going for it. So when Daniel told Sylvia, which I'm sure she said I told you so, but you know, when Daniel told Sylvia, as anyone would be, he was livid. He told Sylvia he was gonna kill Monika. Sylvia brushed it off. She just thought that Daniel was talking nonsense as usual. He was just blowing off a little steam. He would go back and forth between saying he loved her and threatening to end her. Sylvia didn't say anything to anyone. After all, this is Daniel we're talking about. 90% of his rants are barely coherent, let alone legitimate. So when Sylvia and Daniel met up a few days later to hang out, he said again that he was gonna kill her and he was gonna need some help disposing of Monika's body, which once again, Sylvia brushed off. That was a bit of an escalation though. I don't really know why she let that one go, but whatever. Daniel murdered Monika on August 19th of 1989. A few days after the murder, Sylvia dropped in again to grab the last few things she had in the apartment. She walked in, the kind of thing you'd only see in the most gruesome, gore-induced horror thriller on the market. On top of the stove, boiling, was Monika Beerle's head. While most people in their right minds would have hightailed it out of there, Sylvia did not. Instead, she went into the bathroom and there she found blood spatters all over the walls, the floors, the bathtub, everything. So she sent a message to Daniel's pager, and when she got him on the phone, she confronted him, and Daniel told her the whole story. He'd gone to the apartment with a friend he met at a local satanic church. Monika yelled at him, telling him he had a day to pack his things and move out. So Daniel and the alleged friend just sat there talking for a few minutes before Monika came back for more, this time arguing with the friend. Then Daniel just kind of snapped. A 28-year-old mental breakdown that had always been right at the edge of his psyche just overflowed. He walked up behind her with an extension cord and strangled her. Then he stomped on her head 10 times and stabbed her another 30 times. Then he and this mysterious friend dragged Monika into the bathroom and dismembered her. Now, after a confession like that, you might think, surely he's just hours from arrest, right? Like, no one's gonna let this dude get away with killing someone, right? Nope, not Sylvia. Sylvia didn't go to the police, stating she didn't want to hurt him anymore. Bro. Instead, she encouraged him to get the mess cleaned up, stating it wouldn't be long before someone would start asking questions. Daniel agreed, and the call ended. Daniel returned home and got to work. Some of Monika's flesh was carved up, flushed down the toilet. Some of her body was boiled so the skin would fall easily from the bones. The bones that remained, Daniel placed inside of a plastic pail with a cluster of kitty litter, and he dropped it off at a locker at the Port Authority bus terminal. But Mr. Chatterbox just couldn't keep his own big secret. He had to run around town bragging to anyone who would listen that he'd murdered his roommate, cooked some of her remains into a soup which he not only tasted but enjoyed. annoyed, he shared his taboo soup with the unhoused individuals in Tompkins Park. Then he went around referring to himself as a cannibal. And it's one thing to engage in such depravity, it's a whole effing different thing to make others unknowingly partake in your terrible choices. Not okay. So most people who heard the story just thought that this was Daniel being his normal demented self, and this was just another delusion. In a time in a community where trust in law enforcement was low, no one was talking. Sure, they whispered amongst each other. It didn't take long for the story to be heard by most people in the area, but was it reported? It might have been, but who would believe such a horrific story? Who would be degenerate enough to boil a woman and feed her to the hungry? Daniel only remained in the apartment for a couple of weeks after the murder. It wasn't until Sylvia coaxed him to leave for his own good, mentioning that it would not be long until the authorities would come around, that he decided to flee. He left the apartment, shacked up with another girl in a different part of town. Afterwards, Sean went to the landlord. While he wasn't going to talk to the police about Daniel, he was upset that after all that, Daniel just left. It was like Monika died for nothing. So to partially clear his own conscience, he told the apartment's landlord. The landlord contacted the police. The police performed a short investigation, not finding much except a few unsettling phrases scribbled into the apartment's door saying things like, "Is it soup yet?" and "Welcome to Charlie Gein's Spawn Ranch East." Charlie Gein was a play on words, adding the infamous Charlie Manson and Ed Gein, and Spawn Ranch was the residence of the Manson family. The landlord paid Daniel, coaxing him out into the apartment. Daniel agreed to be taken down to the precinct for questioning. He didn't admit to killing Monika, instead saying that if he did, he would have chopped her up into little pieces and flushed her down the toilet. This prompted authorities to tear up the apartment's entire bathroom and investigate the pipes, but they didn't find anything. The detectives left the apartment, but they returned just a few days later where they found Sylvia, who had been hanging out in the apartment at the time. And the police started talking to her. They told her that they'd gotten statements from Sean and a lady across from the hall, and they knew Daniel was guilty. They hadn't gotten any statements, but Sylvia didn't know that. She believed them, and she laid out everything she was told. After she went over the whole story, the police had enough info to arrest Daniel. Daniel led the police back to the locker at the Port Authority and gave them Monika's skull and bones. Daniel was taken into custody and charged with Monika's murder. Now, if you're wondering what happened to that friend who was supposedly in the apartment with Daniel at the time of the murder, the guy from the Satanic Church, well, the police didn't do much investigating. They didn't believe anyone had actually been there. When they questioned Sean and Sylvia about whether they knew what church Daniel was frequenting, none of the possible options ring a bell to either of them. So detectives believe that this person didn't actually exist, that he may have been a figment of Daniel's psychosis. So they didn't do much investigating. I did read one article that says that they eventually arrested and questioned a man named Easterday as a possible accomplice, but apparently not much came out of this lead. Daniel was the only real suspect. The police asked why Daniel would keep Monika's bones, and Daniel's response was that he was planning on sending them back to Monika's mother in Switzerland, which that notion honestly gives me the ick. You literally boiled her daughter and possibly fed her to the homeless, and now you're going to torture her with nothing more than her child's skeletal remains? That's gross. Daniel's trial lasted 7 weeks. During the trial, one of the individuals who supposedly ate the gruesome soup said that he found a human finger bone in his bowl. Others threw in their own testimonies too, but it seems the finger bone thing may have been sensationalized for the press. But it was Daniel's confession to the murder that was the nail in his own coffin. After all, he wasn't trying to hide it from anyone. I mean, he spent the weeks following the murder telling anyone who would listen, after all, so... On February 22nd of 1991, Daniel Rakowitz was found not guilty by reason of insanity. And while that verdict may have kept him out of jail, it got him a one-way ticket to the Kirby Forensic Psychiatric Center, a maximum security facility located on Ward's Island in Manhattan. And that is where the now 63-year-old Daniel Rakowitz resides to this day. He's tried to appeal for release from the facility on a few occasions, and he has been denied every time. It probably doesn't help that he occasionally threatens to eat the staff, so I'm honestly okay with him living out his last few days there. What about you? Do you think justice was served? And that is the end of the story. But before we go, as always, my heart goes out to anyone who knew or loved Monika. I know mourning never ends, but I hope the pain lessens every day. I wish all of you the best. And as always, if you want to see more from me, and if you like true crime and horror interests you, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more. Love ya. Bye.